Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
We've had some really incredible guests on the podcast over the last year. We had a lot of ordinary people talking about how they're making extra money and building wealth with rental properties. We had a lot of landlords sharing some really great tips on how they manage their properties more efficiently. And on the podcast today, I wanted to look back at some of my favorite moments from the last year. So what we're going to do is play some of my favorite clips, some things that really stood out to me over the last year. So let's take a really quick break. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll get into the episode. The first step in buying a rental property is to get pre-qualified. And I would suggest you work with a lender that specializes in working with investors, because the last thing you want to have happen is to get to closing and find out the money's not there and you can't close. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender and she'll pre-qualify you for free if you mention Rental Income Podcast. Find out more today. Contact Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Our first guest today is Edwin Stick Dissoway. What really stuck out to me about Stick was his ability to think long-term. He started off kind of slow, but as he started buying rental properties, he started to gain momentum. And before long, he looked back and he couldn't believe the cash flow that he had built up.
Well, I approached real estate. It's cash flow investing is long-term. So I knew that if I put this self-sustaining unit in place that was bringing me cash flow every month, I had the bonus of knocking down the loan a little bit, and maybe some equity would build up. Mm-hmm. As you get one of those in place and have some success with it, then I can repeat the process, tune it a little bit, got the second one going. And I knew from the beginning it made sense, because we were completing these deals and I'm looking at the result at the end, and I now have something that's going to pay me $200 every month. Right. And I'm just like, cool. That's the objective here. And it's not going to take a ton of my time to do this. I'll be able to figure out ways to make it happen without me being actively involved. And that's an ongoing challenge. So after we got the first one done, it made sense to just roll into the second one, the third one. Of course, in the beginning, it's slow going. You're learning. And I kind of just put my head down and kept going. It was pretty cool to wake up or take a look, maybe 5 deals into it, and suddenly, hey, you've got over $1,000 of income coming in from this.
And I think that beginning is really kind of the hardest part, when you have a couple of deals and you're making a few $100s a month. But as you start to buy more and more properties, and you kind of see that the numbers getting bigger and bigger, it gets more exciting. So how many rentals do you think you were at before you said, wow, I think I'm onto something here. I think that this is going to work out pretty good.
There were different levels. Getting past the first 3 or 4 told me, hey, you know what? This is your job. This is your business. And this is what you're going to do for a while. That became obvious. Mm-hmm. When I was in the teens is when it really struck me. And I had an ability to put my head down, work, and not really pay attention too much to what I already had in the bank. I didn't look at my financial reports too often. I just knew that they were going in the right direction. And then somewhere around 10 or 12 houses, I stopped and looked and went, wow. And people were telling me I was doing this great stuff, but it didn't occur to me. I wasn't actually experiencing it. I was experiencing the next house.
Right.
And I wasn't looking back at all. And boy, is it a treat to do that.
Sure is.
So as I got into, 10 houses, then I'm actually going, I've actually replaced what income I would have been earning at another job, or some version of that.
So where are you today? What does your portfolio look like today?
I currently have about 44 houses. The one goal I had from early on was to collect one rent check for every day of the year. And that meant collecting 30 rent checks in a month plus 3 in case somebody doesn't pay.
If you want to hear more from Stick, he was on episode number 264, and I'm going to have links to all the episodes that we feature on today's episode. You can find them all at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 295. Next up is Amanda Young. What I really liked about Amanda Young, in contrast to Stick, was that Stick needed 10 properties to replace his job income, and he has 44 rentals today. Amanda is a single mom, and she only needed 7 rentals to replace her job income. Really incredible story.
I actually started buying rental properties when I was a single mom, and then shortly thereafter, I became an unemployed single mom. So.
Wow, okay. And today, you make enough off your rentals that it pays your bills?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I only own 7 rentals right now, and that is enough to pay my bills. I'm not living an extravagant lifestyle by any stretch, but they do pay my bills, my groceries, that kind of thing. I also run a flipping business, and that's where I build up a lot of capital as well. But as far as my day-to-day bills, my rentals cover that.
If you want to hear more from Amanda and how she did it, she was on episode number 273. One landlord that really stood out to me that really has the management dialed in on his rental properties was Ron Faraci.
I work hard to minimize all touches with my tenant. Can't eliminate them. But, in my 28-page lease, which surprises some people that I have a 28-page lease, and I do, and they initial that lease probably 40 different times at our lease signing. But within that is all electronic communication only. There's no verbal communication. I need an email or a text, because by having that can set into motion a maintenance, work order for me, where if I take a phone call, typically, you answer the phone like most landlords do, and they'll be like, okay, it's a tenant calling. They freak out. They answer the phone and they explain what the issue is. And you say, okay, well, I can send somebody out there. Are you going to be home today? Sure, I'll be home today till 4. Then I got to take my daughter to a recital. They start, telling you the story. Right. So you call your, right. And so then you call your handyman, and he says, oh yeah, I can get out there. I can get out there about 5 o'clock. Oh, well, she'll be leaving at 4. She goes, okay, well, how about tomorrow? Then you got to call the tenant back.
Yep.
And so now you're in that vortex. You're really just scheduling stuff, aren't you?
Right.
So rule number 1 in my world is I just don't answer the phone. So if they leave a voicemail, the voicemail will transcribe it into text. And then I'll read the text. Oh, you've got a leaky sink. And I forward that text to my maintenance or handy person, the appropriate contractor. Because in the lease, it says, Mr. or Mrs. Tenant, you will schedule any repairs or maintenance with the appropriate tradesperson. You need the work done. He does the work. Y'all figure it out. But by answering the phone, I break that cycle, and so it's all these little things like that. Like I don't take checks, no money orders, anything like that. All my locks are electronic. I use a certain lock that doesn't cost me a lot of money, that if the batteries die or they even take them out, the lock still works with a 9-volt battery. I can jump it. So that becomes my master key. And when I started doing that, people thought it was because, well, if a tenant locks themselves out, I don't have that call anymore, which is true. But the real reason that I do that is so when a contractor has to go to a unit for something, usually it's during the day, tenants work during the day, how are they going to get into the building or to the unit?
Right.
The tenant's at work. So how he has to do it is he has to come to my office, pick up a key, go do the job, then drop off the key at the end of the day because I want my key back, and they're going to charge you for that time. So by having all electronic with master codes, he can just go right to the building, punch in the code, go do the job and leave.
Yeah.
So it's all these little things that add up to minimal touches.
If you want to hear more from Ron, and he shares a lot of other really great tips, you can find him on episode number 281. My next guest only used his first name, John, but he is a big-time saver, and he built his rental portfolio by simply saving money.
I'm the guy that doesn't want to necessarily go out and buy the new car. I'll buy the used car. I'll live below my means. I like saving money. Okay. Because when you work hard at something, and let's just say you happen to be, you're doing okay with your job, you can save that money to the side. That gave me a lot of leverage when I wanted to go buy that apartment house that was for sale. And I said, and I'm talking like, I think the first apartment house I bought was like $51,000, you know? And I'd save for a number of years. Doesn't take a long time. You know, if you save $5,000 a year and you save for 10 years, you got the money.
Right.
And you go up and the guy's for sale and you say, how about if I give you $50,000 now, like tomorrow? And he's like, you don't have to go to the bank, get a mortgage. I was like, no. How about if I just give you 50 right now for the place you're asking 80 for? Of course, you're going to get shut down a lot of times, but all you need is one guy to say yes.
Right.
And so that's how that started. Right. Okay. So then, I bought that thing under market, threw some paint on it, rented it out, and sold that property 2 years later for $150,000. Now I had $150,000, sitting there to use for my next, thing I was going to buy, which I believe at that time was another commercial building. Or was it my first commercial building? And I bought a first commercial building for $150,000 or $120,000. I forget, because I'm going back into the 80s here. So that's sort of without giving the whole war story of what I did.
So it's kind of a simple thing when you think about it. So you had a job, and in your case, you owned a business, but for anyone else that doesn't own a business, you can have a regular job and you can put money aside. You put that money aside, you bought a property, that property increased in value, you took that money and then you just rolled it over to buy something else. Yeah. Now, when
I saved that initial amount and I didn't build, I didn't do the, let me get an equity loan off that property and go get another one. That just wasn't my style. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just not what I wanted to do.
Was it just risk that you didn't want to take on that extra risk?
Well, actually, when I was thinking about it, and please don't misunderstand these words here, but when someone says, I want to retire and just be in the real estate business, for me, you're just saying to me, you want to switch jobs because, real estate is a job. Yes, you could amass enough real estate that maybe you're not going to have to put in an insane amount of time if you can have good cash flow out of it. And so at that time, I thought, well, geez, where can my skills be best monetized? And my skills could be best monetized at work, whatever you do. You could be a dentist, a doctor, an engineer. I happen to be in retail. I'm an importer and exporter. And I just thought, wow, I think I'll spend more time doing this. When I have some money left over, then I'll buy some property. It'll be paid for. I'll get, your money in the bank gets you nothing.
Right.
You know what you get now? Like, what do you get, like 0.07%? So I was thinking like, geez, if I can put $100,000 into that building and get 12% a year, out of the building, that's way better than money in the bank.
Absolutely.
So I sort of looked at those things as, and that's the way I did it. That's the way I built up the stuff, and it's worked so far.
If you want to hear more from John and his no debt investing plan, he was on episode number 263. Next up is another John Soforic. John had a goal that he wanted to make $20,000 a month in rental income. And I was curious how he came up with that number. Why not 10,000? Why not 30,000? How did you get to $20,000 a month in rental income? And here's how he came up with that number.
It's math, Dan. It's totally math. I mean, if you figure out what you want in life, you have to then bring it back to the math in this kind of a game. Absolutely. Could I live on $70,000 a year? Yes. What's the problem of earning $70,000 a year is the next question in rental real estate. I believe that's what you're asking me. If that's what I really need in life. Right? Well, I'll tell you what the problem is. There's tornadoes of life. There's calamities of life. There's bad years and good years. There's a year that the roofs all might come off. The all of the furnaces need repaired. The kids might need to go back to school, and your wife breaks her leg. Those are the kind of things that happen to you. So you have to put margins of safety into life. I didn't want a retirement with worries. Retirement with worries is not freedom to me, man.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So that made my number $100,000. $100,000 was that. Now to have $100,000 to live on, you have to then make more because you're going to pay taxes on that. So I rounded that up to 150. But I also wanted to grow my business. I didn't want to just end. I wanted to still have a life of progress. I really believe that direction in life leads to a lot of happiness for us and satisfaction. So I wanted to retire, but to continue with a certain amount of satisfactory direction. So I factored in another $80,000 because that's what a duplex cost in my area. And I was thinking, if I'm the time for dreaming, when you're sitting out like me, I'm broke making this goal. It's not the time to start figuring out what you can't have. It's time to dream. You imagine, and then you say, okay, let's see if this is possible. Let's see how this is possible, and you let the how catch up to it. So I was just dreaming at that point. I didn't have a plan, and I was broke when I made that goal.
If you want to hear more from John and how he went from broke to $20,000 a month in rental income, he was on episode number 260. Next up is Pam Brantley. Pam is a property manager and an investor, and she has been investing for a really long time. And over the years that she's been investing, she's figured out what's made the perfect rental property. Here's what she said.
My experience with multifamily, the most that I've owned was 46 units. And they were brick duplexes, and, they were all located on one street, and, they were nice duplexes, and they did well for me. However, at an opportune time when the market was up in 2007, I sold them and made a nice profit. I did find when you have 2-bedroom properties that you have more turnover. Single family homes for me has been what I consider the best investment. And the reason for that is because if you own 10 single family homes and you get into financial difficulty or whatever, you could always sell one of them. And, multifamily, on the other hand, if you have 46 units, you got to find somebody that's qualified to put money down and get a loan or, whatever on, a few, I think, I ended up selling them for like $2.something million. So, it's a big chunk of money. Yeah. So if it depends on what bracket you're in, but for the average person that just wants to get started, I think single family homes are great. And I like 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. And the reason for that is because a duplex is basically valued on what you can rent it for. That's it. That's the value. The value is in the cash flow. A single family home, on the other hand, it could provide more value because not only could you sell it to another investor, but you could also sell it to somebody who wanted to live in it. And somebody who wants to live in it might be willing to pay a little bit more than an investor for a property. So the value is not totally tied to how much you can rent it for. As long as you keep your properties up to standards and they look nice, they're going to rent at the max amount of money. But if I'm looking at advising somebody who's trying to buy their first investment property, I'd advise them in Pensacola, Florida, to buy something probably between $100,000 and $150,000.
Yeah,
that's a good bracket to where you can make the numbers work on a rental. If you get a mortgage, put 25% down, you should be able to rent that property for a couple $100 more than your mortgage and your expenses are going to be.
If you want to hear more from Pam, she was on episode number 252. And of course, if you want to look up any of the episodes that we talked about today, you can find them all at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 295. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridgeland Group. If any of our guests inspired you and you're ready to buy your first rental property or you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender, and she specializes in helping investors buy rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or set up a time to talk to Chaley, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will waive all the pre-qualification fees. NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe. We have new interviews every single Tuesday. If you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.